When I discovered a $22 million discrepancy in our books, I thought I was doing the right thing by reporting it. Instead, I was terminated quietly, without warning. My access revoked before I could even pack my desk. But 6 weeks later, an email from the Federal Financial Oversight Office changed everything. They wanted to meet. They needed what I had. And suddenly, being fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. My name is Lauren Whitaker, and at 38, I'd built my entire career on one simple principle: numbers don't lie. As chief accountant at Stratwell Infrastructure, I managed the financial bloodstream of a construction giant that built half the bridges and tunnels on the East Coast. I wasn't the type to join the Friday happy hours or gossip by the water cooler. While my colleagues debated fantasy football picks, I lived in spreadsheets, memorizing cash flows and budget variances like others memorize song lyrics. My office on the 14th floor was deliberately sparse: a desk, 2 monitors, and a single potted succulent that survived on neglect. I arrived at 7:30 sharp each morning, an hour before most, savoring the quiet time to review overnight transactions. That Tuesday morning in October started like any other, with black coffee and the quarterly audit prep. It was during a routine internal review that I spotted it: a series of payments to Durant and Moore, a subcontractor we'd hastily established 3 years prior. The amounts weren't unusual for a construction firm: $600,000 here, $800,000 there, but the patterns were wrong. Invoice numbers that didn't follow our sequential system, payment authorizations with signatures I didn't recognize, work descriptions that read like someone had copied them from a construction textbook. I pulled the full transaction history, $22 million over 18 months. My fingers froze over the keyboard as I cross-referenced the payments against our project timelines. Durant and Moore had been paid for work on the Riverside Bridge expansion, but our own progress reports showed that phase wouldn't begin for another 6 months. I printed everything: bank transfers, invoices, email threads. The stack grew to nearly 2 inches thick. By noon, I'd built a timeline that made my stomach turn. Shell company, fabricated invoices, classic embezzlement, dressed up in contractor agreements and buried in our massive operational budget. I should have known better than to take it directly to Troy Becker, our CFO, but I still believed in the chain of command, still thought the system would protect those who protected it. I knocked on his corner office door at 2:15, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I carried. "Lauren, come in." Troy barely glanced up from his 3 monitors, each displaying different market feeds. At 45, he cultivated the image of a financial wonderkind Patek Philippe watch, Italian suits, MBA from Wharton that he mentioned at least once per meeting. I placed the folder on his desk. "We have a problem with Durant and Moore." That got his attention. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he flipped through the first few pages. "Where did you get this?" "Quarterly audit prep. Troy, this is $22 million in fraudulent—" "Let's not jump to conclusions." He closed the folder, his manicured fingers drumming once on the cover. "I'll review this personally. Good catch. Lauren, I'll handle it from here." The dismissal was clear, but I hesitated. Should we notify legal or bring in external auditors? Troy's smile didn't reach his eyes. I said, "I'll handle it. We don't need to create unnecessary panic over what might be a simple accounting error. You know how these contractors are with their paperwork." I returned to my office, unease settling in my chest like a stone. Troy's reaction was wrong. No follow-up questions, no concern about the amount, no praise for potentially saving the company from a massive loss. Just that tight smile and those 5 words, "I'll handle it from here." I spent the rest of the afternoon backing up everything onto a personal flash drive, my instincts screaming warnings I couldn't yet articulate. By 5 o'clock, when the office emptied out, I was still at my desk, staring at the Durant and Moore file on my screen. I didn't know then that I'd already sealed my fate, that Troy Becker hadn't built his corner office empire by tolerating accountants who looked too closely at the numbers, that in 72 hours, I'd be escorted from the building like a common thief. But I did know this $22 million doesn't disappear by accident, and whoever was behind Durant and Moore had just made a critical error. They'd left a paper trail, and I had copies of every single page. 3 days later, at 9:45 on a Friday morning, my desk phone rang. Not my cell, not my email, the desk phone that hardly anyone used anymore. "Lauren, could you come up to HR, bring your personal items?" The voice belonged to Melissa from Human Resources, professionally neutral with an undertone of discomfort. I knew before I hung up, the timing was too perfect, the request too specific. I'd seen this choreography before with others, always on a Friday, always mid-morning when the office was busy enough that no one would notice one missing person. I packed methodically, the succulent, a coffee mug my niece had painted, 3 framed certificates I'd never bothered to hang. My hands remained steady, but my mind raced through the implications. They weren't just firing me, they were erasing me. The 20th floor HR conference room smelled like vanilla air freshener and fear. Melissa sat across from me, flanked by a security guard I'd never seen before and a woman in a severe black suit who introduced herself as outside counsel. No one made eye contact. "Lauren, I'm afraid we need to inform you that your position is being eliminated as part of a departmental restructuring." Melissa read from a prepared script, her voice flat. "This decision is effective immediately." "Which department is being restructured?" I asked, knowing the answer would be meaningless. The outside counsel leaned forward. "We're not at liberty to discuss the details. You'll find your severance package is quite generous, 3 months' pay, continued health benefits through year-end. In exchange, we'll need you to sign this separation agreement." She slid a document across the table, 20 pages of legal language that essentially amounted to take the money and keep your mouth shut. I flipped to the confidentiality clause, which was more extensive than any I'd seen. It specifically mentioned any and all financial records, transactions, or business relationships during my employment. "I'll need time to review this with my attorney," I said. "Of course, but we'll need your company property now: laptop, phone, badge, any files or documents." The security guard stood, ready to escort me. I pulled out my laptop and phone, placing them on the table with deliberate calm. "My files are all on the shared drive. I don't keep paper documents." The lie came easily. The flash drive in my jacket pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. They walked me to the elevator like a criminal. Melissa carried a banker's box with my personal items. The security guard stayed 2 steps behind. We rode down in silence, passing the 14th floor where my former colleagues were probably just noticing my absence. In the lobby, Melissa handed me the box with that same pained expression. "I'm sorry, Lauren, I really am." I took the box without responding. What was there to say? That I'd uncovered a $22 million fraud, and this was my reward. That Troy Becker was dirty and they were all complicit now. The November air hit me like a slap as I exited onto Madison Avenue. Office workers streamed past, absorbed in their Friday morning routines. I stood there for a moment, holding my pathetic box of possessions, watching the building where I'd spent the last 6 years of my life. My company phone was gone, but my personal cell buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your company email from home. A friend." Except I couldn't check my company email. They'd have deactivated my access the moment I handed over my laptop. Standard protocol. Which meant whoever sent this knew I'd be locked out. They wanted me to understand how thoroughly I'd been erased. I took a cab home to my apartment in Brooklyn, my mind already shifting from shock to strategy. They'd made a critical error in their haste to silence me. The separation agreement, they wanted me to sign it, which meant they needed my cooperation. They were scared. In my home office, I powered up my personal laptop and inserted the flash drive. $22 million in fraudulent payments, all documented, all traced. Troy Becker's name wasn't directly on any of it, but his authorization codes were all over the approval chains, digital breadcrumbs leading right to his corner office. I poured myself a glass of wine at 2 p.m, something I'd never done before, and stared at the data. They'd fired me to bury this. They thought a severance package and a legal threat would keep me quiet. They assumed I was the type to take the money and disappear. They were wrong. I opened a new browser window and began researching whistleblower protections, federal oversight agencies, and the statute of limitations on corporate fraud. If Stratwell Infrastructure wanted to make me disappear, they should have done a better job. Because I still had the receipts, and I was about to become their $22 million problem. The weekend passed in a blur of spreadsheets and coffee. I transformed my dining table into a war room. papers spreading across every surface like evidence in a crime scene, which, I supposed, it was. I started with the basics, rebuilding the entire Durant and Moore puzzle from memory and my saved files. Each invoice got its own sheet, color-coded and cross-referenced, yellow highlighter for suspicious payment authorizations, pink for impossible project timelines, green for the signatures that didn't match our approved vendor database. By Sunday night, I'd constructed something beautiful in its damning clarity, a flowchart showing exactly how $22 million had hemorrhaged from Stratwell into a phantom company. The scheme was almost elegant. Durant and Moore would invoice for materials and labor on projects that were real but scheduled for the future. By the time those projects actually started, the paper trail would be so muddled that no one would notice the double billing. Except someone had gotten greedy. The amounts had escalated too quickly, the invoices too frequent. That's what had caught my eye during the audit prep. I found the smoking gun buried in an email thread from 18 months ago. Troy had forwarded a Durant and Moore invoice to accounts payable with a note. Process this outside normal channels. Special procurement for Riverside expansion. But I'd been tracking the Riverside expansion since its inception. We hadn't even broken ground 18 months ago. My laptop screen glowed in the dark apartment as I dug deeper. Durant and Moore's corporate registration led to a Delaware LLC, which led to another shell company in Nevada. Classic money laundering structure. But whoever set it up had made one crucial mistake. They'd used a Stratwell company email to register the initial domain. tmayer@stratwellinfra.com. Thomas Meyer, Senior VP of Strategic Partnerships, Troy's golf buddy and cocaine confidant. If office rumors were true, I'd found the second player. I leaned back, rubbing my tired eyes. The smart move would be to take this to a lawyer. Negotiate a better severance. Maybe leverage it into a consulting contract. Stay quiet. Stay safe. Stay employed somewhere else. That's what a rational person would do. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing. Summary of Financial Irregularities at Stratwell Infrastructure, prepared by Lauren Whitaker, CPA, former Chief Accountant. 40 pages, every transaction, every date, every falsified signature. I included screenshots of the emails, copies of the invoices, and a detailed timeline that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. At 3:17 in the morning, I added my final conclusion. Based on my analysis, Stratwell Infrastructure has been systematically defrauded of at least $22 million through a shell company operation involving senior executives. This report represents only confirmed transactions. The actual total may be significantly higher. I saved it all report, evidence, supporting documents into a single encrypted PDF. Then I created 3 copies, one on the flash drive, one uploaded to a secure cloud service, one emailed to my personal attorney with instructions to open only if something happened to me. Was I being paranoid? Maybe, but I just documented how 2 executives had stolen more money than most people see in a lifetime. Paranoid seemed appropriate. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal one I'd worn to my Stratwell interview 6 years ago. If I was going to war, I wanted armor. The separation agreement still sat on my kitchen counter, unsigned. They'd given me a week to review it. I had other plans for that week. I spent Monday researching federal whistleblower protections, specifically the Dodd-Frank provisions that could entitle me to a percentage of any recovered funds. Tuesday, I identified the right contacts at the Federal Financial Oversight Office. Wednesday, I polished my report until it was bulletproof. Thursday morning, I did something I'd never done in my professional career. I walked into a FedEx office and sent an anonymous package to the FFO's enforcement division. No return address. No identifying information except what was in the report itself. Then I went home and waited. The smart criminals would have hidden their tracks better, but Troy and Thomas had gotten comfortable. Sloppy. They thought their positions made them untouchable. They thought a quiet accountant who kept to herself would simply disappear when pushed. They thought wrong. That night, I poured another glass of wine and stared at the Manhattan skyline from my Brooklyn window. Somewhere in those glittering towers. Troy Becker was probably at some overpriced steakhouse, charging $500 dinners to the company card, completely unaware that his carefully constructed scheme was about to collapse. I'd done my part. The evidence was out there now, beyond their reach. beyond their ability to bury or buy off. All I had to do was wait for the machinery of justice to slowly, inevitably, grind into motion. But first, I needed to disappear for a while, because if I'd learned anything from my years handling Stratwell's finances, it was this: when $22 million is at stake, people don't just get fired. They get dangerous. Friday morning, I loaded my car with a week's worth of clothes and drove north. No GPS, no credit cards, just cash I'd withdrawn in small amounts over the past few days. My destination was a cabin in the Adirondacks that belonged to my college roommate's family. She'd given me the key years ago for when you need to escape that corporate prison, she'd joked. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I powered down my phone 2 hours outside the city, tossing it in the glove compartment like radioactive waste. For someone who'd lived tethered to technology, the silence felt both liberating and terrifying. No emails, no calls, no way for anyone to track me. The cabin sat on 40 acres of pine forest, accessed by a dirt road that my Civic barely managed. Inside, it was all knotty pine and vintage furniture, frozen in 1972. No internet, no cable, just a landline that I immediately unplugged. I'd brought books, dense novels I'd bought but never read during my Stratwell years. Tolstoy, Morrison, Murakami, but I couldn't focus on the words. Instead, I sat on the screened porch, watching chipmunks raid the bird feeder, and replayed every decision that had led me here. Should I have gone through proper channels first? Reported to the audit committee instead of Troy, but half the board played golf with him at Westchester Country Club. They'd have buried it just as quickly, probably with a nicer severance package. The weekend passed in a blur of bad coffee and worse sleep. I'd dream about spreadsheets, wake up calculating invoice numbers. $22 million. It had become my mantra, my obsession. How many people could that money have helped? How many legitimate contractors had lost bids to Durant and Moore's phantom operations? By Tuesday, the isolation was wearing on me. I'd finished one novel, started another, given up, chopped enough firewood to last the winter, cleaned the cabin twice. The chipmunks had become my primary source of entertainment. I lasted until Thursday before cracking. The general store in town had a computer in the back ancient Dell running Windows XP, but it connected to the internet. I paid the owner $20 cash for an hour of access and logged into a throwaway email account. 17 new messages in the anonymous account I'd created for the whistleblower submission. My hands trembled as I clicked the first one. Spam. Spam. Nigerian prince. Spam. Then, buried in the middle. From aprice@ffo.gov. Subject RE. Financial Irregularities Report. Stratwell Infrastructure Date. Tuesday, 9:43 a.m. We have received your submission and initiated a preliminary review. Your documentation appears substantial. We would like to arrange a confidential meeting to discuss this matter further. Please respond with your availability and preferred secure contact method. Angela Price, Senior Investigator. Federal Financial Oversight, Enforcement Division. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They'd responded. They were taking it seriously. The next email was from Troy Becker's personal Gmail, sent Wednesday at 2:14 a.m. I know it was you. We can work this out. Call me. My blood chilled. He'd figured it out. Of course he had. Who else would have noticed the discrepancies? Who else had access to all the pieces? But how had he found this email address? I deleted his message without responding and cleared the browser history. The store owner was absorbed in a newspaper, barely glancing up as I left. Back at the cabin, I made a decision. Hiding wasn't solving anything. If the FFO wanted to meet, I'd meet them. But on my terms, in a public place, with witnesses. I drove to a different town, found a payphone at a rest stop they still existed, apparently, and called the number Angela Price had included in her email. FFO Enforcement, Price speaking. This is the person who sent the Stratwell report. A pause. I'm glad you called. We've reviewed your documentation. It's quite thorough. Are you available to meet in person? We can ensure your safety and confidentiality. New York Public Library, Main Branch, Reading Room, Monday at 2 p.m. I'll be there. Look for a woman in a navy suit carrying a red folder. I hung up before she could ask more questions. 5 days until the meeting. 5 days to decide how much I was willing to risk, how far I was willing to go. That night, I built a fire and watched the flames consume the kindling. Somewhere in Manhattan, Troy Becker was probably losing sleep, wondering what I'd done with the evidence, who I'd told. Good. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. I'd been the quiet one, the careful one, the one who followed rules and trusted the system. That woman had been escorted from the building with a box of dead plants and broken promises. This woman, the one who documented fraud, contacted federal investigators, and disappeared into the mountains, she was different. She was done being quiet. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Monday arrived crisp and bright. One of those perfect November days that made Manhattan almost bearable. I took the train from Poughkeepsie, paying cash for my ticket, and emerged at Grand Central like any other commuter, anonymous in a city of millions. The New York Public Library's main branch rose before me on Fifth Avenue, its stone lions guarding secrets far older than mine. I arrived 40 minutes early, circling the building twice, checking exits, watching faces, paranoid, maybe, but Troy's email had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. The Rosemain reading room stretched before me like a cathedral of knowledge. I chose a table with clear sightlines to both entrances and pretended to read a biography of J.P. Morgan. Fitting, considering I was about to expose modern-day robber barons. At 1:58, a woman entered carrying a red folder. Navy suit, just as promised. Mid-40s, African-American, with the kind of purposeful walk that screamed federal agent. She scanned the room once before approaching my table. Mind if I sit? Angela Price didn't wait for an answer. Up close. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, tired. Thank you for coming. You said my documentation was thorough. It's the most comprehensive fraud report we've received in years, bar none. She opened the red folder, revealing printed copies of my report. My screenshots were tagged with yellow sticky notes. We've been monitoring Stratwell since 2021, but we lack the internal perspective. Your evidence fills crucial gaps. Since 2021. My mind raced. You mean this isn't the first time? Angela's smile was grim. Let's just say Durant and Moore isn't their only creative venture, but it's the sloppiest. Someone got greedy. Troy Becker. Among others, she leaned forward. Here's what I can tell you. We're opening a formal investigation based on your report. But we need more. We need someone who understands their systems, their processes. Someone who can testify to the authenticity of these documents. You want me to be a witness? I want you to be a consultant. Paid position, federal protection, full whistleblower rights under Dodd-Frank. She slid a business card across the table. Think about it. In the meantime, we need to discuss your safety. My safety. You sent Troy Becker into panic mode. Our surveillance indicates he's been making interesting phone calls. Nothing actionable yet, but... She paused. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I thought of the cabin, my dwindling cash reserves. For now? Good. Keep a low profile. Don't respond to any contact from Stratwell or its executives. And Lauren, she used my name for the first time. You did the right thing. Not everyone would have had the courage. We talked for another hour. Angela explained the investigation process, the potential timeline, what they'd need from me. By the time we parted, the reading room was bathed in afternoon light, and my entire future had shifted course. I walked out onto Fifth Avenue feeling strangely buoyant. For the first time since that Friday morning in HR, I had agency. I wasn't just a discarded employee anymore. I was evidence. I was ammunition. My phone, still off, weighed heavy in my pocket. I found a coffee shop in Grand Central and powered it on. The screen exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from unknown numbers. 12 texts from former colleagues. 23 emails in my personal account. I scrolled through, deleting anything from Stratwell domains. Then I saw it an email from my attorney, marked urgent. Lauren, Stratwell's legal team contacted me. They're claiming you stole proprietary information. They're threatening criminal charges unless you return all company documents and sign an enhanced NDA. Call me immediately. So they'd escalated from carrots to sticks. Predictable. I forwarded the email to Angela Price with a simple note, FYI. They're getting desperate. Her response came within minutes. Perfect. Desperate people make mistakes. Stay the course. I bought a new burner phone at a kiosk, transferred only essential contacts, and dropped my old phone in a trash can. If Stratwell wanted to play hardball, they'd need to find me first. That evening, I checked into a modest hotel near Penn Station under a variant of my middle name. From my window, I could see the Hudson River and, beyond it, the New Jersey office parks where Stratwell had satellite locations. Somewhere over there, middle managers were working late, unaware their company was under federal investigation, unaware that their CFO had stolen enough money to fund a small school district. I ordered room service and opened my laptop. Time to plan Phase 2. The FFO had offered me protection and a position, but I had a different idea. If I was going to testify, if I was going to put my career and safety on the line, I wanted more than a government consulting fee. I wanted to build something of my own, something clean. I started drafting a business plan. Whitaker Risk and Audit. Independent forensic accounting for companies that actually wanted to find the truth. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but then again, 6 weeks ago, taking down a Fortune 500 CFO had seemed impossible too. And look how that was turning out. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after my meeting with Angela Price. I was sitting in a midtown coffee shop, reviewing incorporation documents for Whitaker Risk and Audit, when my burner phone buzzed. "Turn on CNBC!" Angela's voice was barely containing excitement. "Now!" The mounted TV above the barista station was tuned to sports highlights. I asked them to change the channel, and there it was, Stratwell's logo filling the screen behind a stern-faced anchor. Federal investigators have raided the offices of Stratwell Infrastructure following allegations of widespread financial fraud. Sources indicate the investigation centers on senior executives and potentially fraudulent payments exceeding $20 million. My coffee went cold as I watched FBI agents carrying boxes from Stratwell's Madison Avenue headquarters, the same lobby where I'd been escorted out 6 weeks ago. The symmetry was delicious. My phone buzzed again, this time, a text from a former colleague. "Troy's office is wrapped in crime scene tape. What did you do?" I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up Stratwell's stock price on my laptop, down 12% in pre-market trading. By the closing bell, it would drop another 8. The story evolved throughout the day. By noon, Troy Becker's photo was plastered across financial news sites. CFO of major infrastructure firm under federal investigation. By 3 p.m., Thomas Meyer had been named as a co-conspirator. By evening, the board had announced an emergency meeting and trading in Stratwell stock was halted. I watched it all from my temporary office, a shared workspace in Chelsea that I'd rented week to week. Around me, startup founders pitched investors and freelancers typed furiously. None of them knew that the woman in the corner cubicle had just toppled a Fortune 500 executive. Angela called again at 6 p.m. "Can you meet tomorrow? Our legal team wants to discuss your testimony timeline." "Actually," I said, watching Troy's perp walk replay on my muted laptop screen, "I have a counteroffer. I'll testify. Provide all documentation. Help your forensic team navigate Stratwell's systems. But I want formal recognition as a consultant, not just a witness. And I want the FFO's blessing to advertise that fact once the case is public." Silence. Then, "You're building something." Whitaker Risk and Audit, independent forensic accounting, and having assisted federal investigation into 22 entourage fraud case in my bio would be helpful. Angela laughed, the first genuine emotion I'd heard from her. "Send me a proposal. I'll run it up the chain." That night, I worked until 3 a.m., fueled by adrenaline and terrible Chinese takeout. My business plan grew from ambitious to audacious. If I was going to rise from Stratwell's ashes, I might as well soar. By Thursday, the media had the full story. Whistleblower exposes massive fraud at Stratwell Infrastructure. They didn't name me